Good morning, everyone. My name is Sudhir. I'm from Bravient Holdings. We are a fintech startup from Chicago. So we lend to people who can't get loans from a regular banks because of their credit history or credit scores. So our business is to bring them to the mainstream scenario where they can get loans from the main banks or other streams where credit score is much more important. So someone, because they just did couple of mistakes, their credit score might go down. So we will pull them back to the mainstream by lending them small amount of money and enabling them to pay us back in small amounts. So that's our business, and we are completely a Postgres workshop, and we built our own infrastructure like mechanisms for ETL, and we didn't buy any tools to do the regular data migration between a MySQL or SQL Server or S3 CSV files to our Postgres database. So how did we do that? So let me go through the architecture of how we implemented that and how we pull the data from different sources to Postgres. And we need that data not only for our data warehouse system, we need that data instantly to our OLTP system. For every query every transaction our user does on our website would go to the OLTP system, would hit the MySQL database in a third-party database, which is not our own database. So to get that instant access of database, we implemented a infrastructure like a mechanism through foreign tables, through MySQL foreign data wrapper, communicating instantly from Postgres to MySQL. So how did we do that? Okay. So what's the problem? This looks like a normal MySQL foreign data wrapper thing, right? You can always install MySQL foreign data wrapper in Postgres and communicate to MySQL from Postgres. But what's the main problem? We are on AWS, and our Postgres is on AWS RDS instance. So AWS RDS instance restricts one thing. It only communicates Postgres to Postgres through Postgres foreign data wrapper. So it doesn't support MySQL foreign data wrapper to be installed on AWS RDS instance. So how could we communicate to MySQL without MySQL foreign data wrapper? So we spin up this is the mechanism we implemented, which is like creating a tunnel between MySQL database to Postgres RDS instance through two sets of foreign tables, and an EC2 instance between the MySQL database and Postgres database. So we spin up an EC2 instance on a regular EC2 server, and we install MySQL foreign data wrapper and Postgres foreign data wrapper in that. And we created foreign tables pointing to MySQL database, which is a third-party database and we don't have access to it. It's like a loan management service provider. So then we created another set of foreign tables in our Postgres RDS instance, which are pointing to foreign tables which were created in EC2 instance. So like this, we have two sets of foreign tables which are pointing to actual tables in MySQL database. So in this way, we created a tunnel that if we access our foreign table in OLTP database, our Postgres RDS instance, we get data instantly from MySQL database, instead of loading MySQL data into our system or having any other API techniques to get the data. So how did we achieve that? Like, for example, so this kind of view, a view will be created on the EC2 instance, which we call it as a proxy server between our Postgres OLTP database and MySQL database. So this view will be on proxy server. What is this doing? it's running a function accessing the a table, but what it's doing, it's like it's selecting a record. So we are saying call this function using the values from these two columns. So what does the function do? So this function is pointing to the tables, this foreign table is pointing to that view which is in proxy server. So in this way, when we run the query, it would access the tables on MySQL database and pull the data for that one record. So having this foreign table on our OLTP database, what it's doing, it's pointing to the proxy server where we have this view. So a view is pointing to another view in the proxy server, and that view is pointing to foreign tables which are pointing to MySQL database. So in this way, from OLTP database, we could grab the data which we want through MySQL foreign data wrapper, which is installed on EC2 instance. And we did, and this was pretty fast, and we wanted our transactions to be fast because it's an OLTP database, and we do want all the tables to be accessed almost, because to complete a transaction for the user. So it will be looking something like this. On OLTP server, I would just run this query on this view, which would get this, push this username and brand to the function, and this function would be pointing to the proxy server, and proxy server will be pointing to MySQL database. So we could initially instantaneously get the values using this kind of setup, and we didn't want to install any third-party tools to achieve this. So we created our own system where you create two sets of foreign tables and create a view which is pointing to that foreign table. So okay, everything was working fine until some time, but one issue: if you access only one record at a time, everything works fine. But if you access more than one record using that query, for example, instead of giving username and brand, if you do just limit to, not even more than one, any value if you limit, it would fail, because the function takes only one value. It can't understand multiple values. The view is pointing to a function which takes only one value for username and one value for brand. If you limit to, this would fail. So we had a scenario where we have to collect data for multiple usernames and brands at a time for analysis and reporting purposes. So, but if you, the main issue was, if at all we write a query which would pull more than one record to our system from MySQL database, first thing it won't work because the function would fail, because the function expects only one record, one username and one brand value as its parameters. Next, the next issue is utilizing the remote indexes on the MySQL side. So, for example, this query, there is index on loan ID, there is index on loan ID and ID in these all three tables in MySQL database. But when I run this remote query from OLTP database, that MySQL is unable to understand that I have to use these indexes. When I join with multiple tables in OLTP side and push the query to MySQL, it can't understand like I have indexes, but I can't use them. Why is that happening here? So, for example, this is the initial scenario what we faced. If you do this simple join with two different tables which are pointing to the MySQL database, so both loan IDs have the loan ID and ID have indexes. The loan settings table for loan ID has index, and the loan entity table ID has index on the MySQL side. But we are unable to use those indexes on the MySQL side. And this table is making in complete table scan for the loan settings table and the custom field entity table. We couldn't use the indexes on the remote side of MySQL. So this was our solution. So we have to create a function which would, on the proxy server, so which would generate this query where it would understand that, okay, this is a join with loan ID, and you have to get the values for this from the MySQL side. So how does it work? I think next slide would explain much better. Okay, so this is our use case. I'll just jump to the use case so that it is a much better example to understand what's happening and what we are trying to solve here. So because we are unable to use the remote indexes, first thing we understood that MySQL is unable to understand the inbuilt functions of Postgres, which is some now function. So when you include, let us say the last updated is equal to now in this query. When you push this query, MySQL is unable to understand what is now here. And somehow it's doing the whole scan even if there is an index on last updated. So what we did was we have to convert this now to an actual value. So we had to generate this query such that the now is always replaced with actual value, and MySQL doesn't need to figure out the value of now. So we modified the query such that we dynamically generate the query and replace the last updated, condition on the last updated, such that the value always a now value is passed as a parameter to it, instead of MySQL figuring out what is now. So this helped us utilizing the index on last updated, but it's not over yet. We are not going to use the last updated every time, but we have other conditions which we use, such that we search for loan IDs, like list of loan IDs. Then how would it work on that case? Still the indexes are even with the indexes on the loan ID, this particular part couldn't use the index. So it is pulling last updated index and getting the values here, but when it comes to this subquery, the loan IDs, even with the loan index on the loan ID, it couldn't use the index on loan ID here, and it has to do the whole table scan for loan setup. So how we worked furthermore to solve this problem, like how we can use the index on loan ID also here, additionally using the index on last updated. So basically MySQL couldn't understand that it's a subselect and I have to get only these values and search for those, even if there is an index on loan ID. So we came up with a second level of optimization where we generate the loan IDs as a parameter. So first we pre-select the loan IDs based on last updated. So that's using the index, because there is loan now value was parameterized in the first query, and the first query is pretty fast because there is index on last updated and we were using that. Then we stored those index values in a parameter, and in the second query we are passing those loan IDs value as a parameter to it. So we are dynamically generating the second query based on pre-selecting the loan IDs using the last updated. So now, because the loan IDs are like parameterized and the last update is parameterized, now we have achieved the level of optimization we needed for it, because now it can use the indexes on last updated and loan ID, because it can understand that MySQL can understand that these are the values I need to look for, and it's using loan ID and it's not doing any table scan for the loan IDs. But everything worked for some time, so we got the solution. We modified all the queries such that everywhere we used loan IDs in subselect, we pre-selected the loan IDs and parameterized those values so that we can dynamically generate the query to search for those queries. But until and unless we found this issue. So this is the setup. If till now I explained the setup what we had right now. So this is MySQL database, and if you see, those are the tables we need. And this is a proxy server which has MySQL foreign data wrapper and foreign tables pointing to those tables through MySQL foreign data wrapper. And this is our OLTP server, which has again foreign tables which are pointing to foreign tables of proxy server. So this is the whole setup we have, which I have explained till now. So everything was working fine until we found that if you have multiple joins, one of the join would somehow pull nulls, and it would return only one value for the first row, and all other values are going to be nulls. So when you run query from here, adding joins between tables, and if you push through two sets of foreign tables, one is PostgresSQL foreign table and other is MySQL foreign table through MySQL foreign data wrapper. Somehow when you pull the data from OLTP server, the value gets nulls and you are getting inconsistent data. But when you run the same query from using the foreign tables in proxy server, we can see that the data is fine. As you see, eSign status is null here and there is 1 there. So we thought, how could we solve this problem? I think the main issue is the data is getting lost when it passes through two sets of foreign tables and we are getting nulls. So we wanted to somehow reduce the, how can we solve the problem by getting the constant value and achieving that level of optimization required for OLTP. So we thought, let's remove one set of foreign tables and see how we can run this query only on the proxy server and grab the data to our OLTP server. So we came up with this solution. So we used dblink on our OLTP server, and we are saying push the query to proxy server, and when proxy server we are using MySQL foreign data wrapper to pull the records, and now we are getting the data. So the whole problem is that because we were using two sets of foreign tables, somehow the data is getting lost on path to OLTP. So using this technique, we are dynamically generating the query here and pushing through dblink to our proxy server. And proxy server is running on those foreign tables on proxy server, pointing to MySQL database and grabbing the data. And we are pulling the data through dblink to our OLTP server. So this resolved our issue, and right now we almost have all the functions working in a similar process where we need more than one record to be accessed at a time for our OLTP server. If for one record, the whole system works fine, but for more than one record, you are getting a lot of issues here. So any questions? Any doubts? Chicago, downtown. Yeah.
You provide microloans, you said?
Yeah.
For who and where?
For it's like we are in 9 states, and for anyone who can get through our screening process. Anyone within that states who can get through our screening process.
When you're talking about microloans, how small are they?
It starts from it depends on state again. Each state has a different regulation, but I think it starts from $500 to $2,000 to $3,000.
And your customers are who, in particular?
People who can't get loans through the mainstream banking.
So your average person,
Hmm?
it's your average person, or is it somebody else, like a business?
No, it's a person, not the business. It's not a loan provider for businesses. It's for people who doesn't have better credit score, good credit score, who can't get loans from a regular banking solution.